Tonight, we open with a legal shockwave that federal prosecutors had long anticipated, constitutional scholars had forecast, and the political establishment had quietly dreaded. A federal indictment that did not unfold through months of public maneuvering, but arrived in one crushing morning, one morning that cracked decades of assumed protection, one morning that altered the boundaries of American justice. One morning that placed a former president of the United States directly in the shadow of a life behind prison walls. What Donald J. Trump is confronting now represents a threshold the Department of Justice never wanted to cross. But once that threshold collapsed, a response came swiftly from an unlikely center of American influence. Elon Musk, the world's wealthiest individual, the owner of X, and one of the most powerful amplifiers in modern political discourse, ended his silence. And his intervention was startling, deliberate, and unmistakably strategic. For months, there had been murmurs, not through official announcements, not through formal filings, just low-level signals suggesting federal prosecutors were assembling something extraordinary against the former president. Trump has faced indictments before, and each time he met them with defiance. His legal playbook has been familiar, predictable, almost performative, carefully choreographed to energize his base and dominate the narrative. But what triggered concern in Washington this week was not escalation, it was absence. Veteran legal observers know the warning signs: grand jury activity abruptly sealed, unusual movements by senior Justice Department officials, silent coordination across multiple federal jurisdictions, and perhaps most telling of all, the sudden evaporation of leaks from inside sources. The noise vanished. And when Washington goes quiet, it's never by accident. And whenever the Department of Justice falls silent on a case of this magnitude, it's a warning sign, because silence at that level usually means something explosive is coming, something deafening. The RICO statute, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, is not a tool prosecutors reach for casually. It was built to dismantle criminal syndicates. It was crafted to break the mafia. It was meant for organized crime networks, not former presidents of the United States, at least not until now. Earlier today, the Department of Justice quietly unsealed what sources describe as a sweeping 98-page federal indictment, revealing alleged criminal coordination that had remained hidden throughout more than 3 years of investigation. These are the types of charges federal prosecutors file only when they are sending an unmistakable message: total dismantlement, absolute accountability, or the collapse of political immunity as America has long understood it. Legal experts were unsure which of those messages applied, or whether all three had arrived at once. But one thing was clear: the Justice Department had fundamentally shifted its stance. And when the federal government alters its posture toward a former president, even subtly and without explanation, every center of power in the country takes notice. According to the indictment, prosecutors allege that Trump led what they describe as a continuing criminal enterprise, extending from his time in the Oval Office into his post-presidency. The charges include conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of official proceedings, wire fraud tied to political fundraising, witness tampering, and the most serious allegation of all, operating a racketeering enterprise. If found guilty on every count, Donald Trump could face up to 90 years in federal prison. At 78 years old, that is not theoretical. It is, for all practical purposes, a life sentence. Several times over, the statement released by the Department of Justice tonight was anything but ordinary. It was not procedural. It was not symbolic. It was precise and unambiguous. Sources close to the Attorney General's office described the indictment as historically unprecedented, meticulously constructed, and, most critically, engineered to survive political pressure or outside interference. But legal pressure only has power if the defendant pauses. Trump didn't pause. Instead, his response today marked one of the most aggressive counterattacks of his legal career. Within hours of the indictment becoming public, Trump's legal team filed emergency motions across 3 separate federal courts. These were not routine filings. They were constitutional offensives, legal heavy artillery that Trump's attorneys reserve for moments when his political survival is on the line. And then came the moment no one expected. What happened next stunned everyone. Elon Musk, who until now had largely stayed quiet about Trump's mounting legal peril, abruptly broke that silence with a barrage of posts on X that have since amassed more than 200 million views. According to multiple sources, Musk issued a statement aimed directly at the Department of Justice itself, accusing it of political bias and what he described as the weaponization of law enforcement against democracy. Notably, Musk moved faster than Trump's own team. He went after the timing of the indictment. He named and criticized individual prosecutors. He condemned what he framed as a dual-track justice system designed to punish political adversaries. In doing so, Musk effectively cast himself as Trump's most influential shield, a billionaire with the unmatched ability to project Trump's narrative to hundreds of millions of people in real time. That is what turned this indictment into something far more volatile. Trump's legal exposure was no longer confined to courtrooms. It had become a battle over narrative control and information war. And Musk, fully aware of that terrain, entered the fight deliberately, not emotionally, not impulsively, but with precision. He didn't simply vent outrage. He didn't flood the platform with vague accusations. Instead, he published what he claimed were internal communications pointing to political coordination. He highlighted data about algorithmic behavior on rival platforms. He transformed X into a command center for Trump's defense, and the digital landscape detonated. Within hours, pro-Trump hashtags surged to the top of global trends. Tens of millions of users engaged directly with Musk's posts. This was not organic noise. It bore the hallmarks of a coordinated counterstrike. And this is where the situation deepens. Legal analysts now suggest the Justice Department's decision to invoke RICO was meant to probe the outer limits of prosecutorial authority during an election cycle. The theory was simple: apply maximum legal pressure and observe whether political alliances fracture under the strain. Instead, the reverse occurred. Trump's supporters didn't splinter. They unified rapidly and with an intensity that caught even seasoned observers off guard. Musk's unambiguous backing is not easily earned, yet today, Trump secured it. Former federal prosecutors speaking anonymously on major networks characterized the RICO approach as a pressure tactic, one intended to corner Trump into a plea agreement before voters ever cast their ballots. But Trump's reaction today sent a different signal. Fundraising spiked within hours. Early polling showed no measurable erosion. To his base, the indictment wasn't proof of wrongdoing, it was confirmation of persecution. And that interpretation carries weight because it suggests the Justice Department misread the political consequences. It reveals that Trump does not function like a conventional defendant. He operates as the center of a political movement, and movements do not respond to indictments the way individuals do. As the day unfolded, the scope of the response became clearer. Republican lawmakers launched a coordinated media offensive, forcing national networks to air their counter-narrative. Conservative outlets began scrutinizing the lead prosecutors, examining their political donations and past public remarks. Grassroots organizations across all 50 states reportedly raised more than $20 million within the first 8 hours following the indictment. And that was just the beginning. This wasn't merely a legal defense. It wasn't standard political messaging. It was institutional activation. It was narrative control at scale. It was information dominance. And information dominance is precisely where the Department of Justice has struggled since the investigation began. Every legal step prosecutors have taken has been met with a counter move that reframes the story entirely. The courtroom is only one front, the digital space is another. And in that arena, Trump now has the most powerful amplifier on the planet standing beside him. Elon Musk ends his silence. The Justice Department believed the evidence would carry the weight. They believed the gravity of RICO charges would push Republicans to create distance. They believed a detailed 98-page indictment would lead the public to draw its own conclusions. Tonight, that assumption is collapsing. Republican leaders are labeling the indictment election interference. Conservative media is portraying prosecutors as partisan operatives. And Trump himself is framing the case as the most aggressive political persecution in American history, language he has used before, but never with this level of visible reinforcement from his base. What makes this moment especially volatile is the timing. Trump's indictment arrives as President Biden faces mounting pressure on multiple fronts. Progressive Democrats are demanding aggressive accountability. Moderate Democrats want clear separation from anything that appears politically motivated. Republicans are unified in calling foul, and independent voters are left searching for clarity amid a flood of conflicting narratives. The Attorney General is navigating all of this while trying to preserve the image of neutral justice. And when prosecutors make moves this forceful under those conditions, it's not because they're comfortable, it's because they're calculating. It's because they believe the evidence leaves no alternative. But evidence doesn't decide elections. Stories do. And at this moment, Trump is dominating the story. The Justice Department's statement, distributed across every major media outlet, was crafted to send a clear signal. Political consequences would not dictate prosecutorial decisions. Officials stated that Trump's alleged actions were incompatible with the oath of office and the rule of law. Translated from institutional language, the message was blunt. Prosecutors believe serious federal crimes occurred during and after his presidency. You don't hear that kind of tone from the Department of Justice unless something extraordinary is on the line. And a potential 90-year federal sentence is extraordinary. No former president has ever faced this. No former president has ever been accused of operating a criminal enterprise tied to the Oval Office itself. This is uncharted ground for the American system. At the same time, Trump released a defiant video message to supporters just hours after the indictment became public. He framed the case as an attack not just on him, but on his followers. He argued the prosecution was about power, not justice. And he warned that what was being done to him could be done to anyone. These weren't casual remarks. They were calculated signals from someone who understands exactly how high the stakes now are. Trump is no longer fighting solely for personal freedom. He is fighting for historical judgment. He is fighting for the survival of his political movement. And based on today's response, that movement is fully engaged. And here is what raises even more concern. The indictment did not land in isolation. Alongside the RICO charges, the Trump Organization is once again under intensified scrutiny in New York. Several of Trump's allies in Congress are now facing subpoenas connected to January 6th. And former attorneys within Trump's inner circle are reportedly under increasing pressure to cooperate with federal investigators. Which brings us to the question now circulating quietly inside Washington power circles. The Department of Justice's real strategy may finally be coming into view. All of this unfolded within the same 72-hour window. And when prosecutors move that many pieces at once, it signals something larger than a single case.